Hi, everybody. This is Ann Patchett at Parnassus Books. Thank you for listening to Parnassus Presents. Your support allows us to keep bringing you fantastic events. So please consider purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book at the link below. We hope you enjoy the event, recorded live from the Parnassus stage.
We are really excited to welcome Nicola Yoon, who is a #1 New York Times bestselling author, an award-winning author of books for young adults, and she's here to celebrate her debut adult novel, One of Our Kind. And Nicola is in conversation with Julian Vaca, who is a local author and TV writer and a great friend of Parnassus. So join us in welcoming Nicola and Julian.
How's everyone doing? Yeah? Excited to celebrate Nicola Yoon's adult debut? Yes! This is really, really exciting. I'm a huge fan, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation. And you've been obviously so busy with this tour. So many exciting things have been happening. Yeah. Like Seth Meyers last night. I mean, that's huge. Right, what's it been like on this tour?
I mean, it's been... Well, first, thank you for coming. Honestly, it is a Wednesday night. And you have other things to do. So thanks for coming to the bookstore and hanging out with us. I really appreciate that. It's been a great tour because usually I'm in my office at home and writing is fairly lonely. And I always say I'm like a troll in my cave. And now I get to come out and meet you guys and talk to you. And that is like the best thing. But last night I was on Seth Meyers, and that was cool. That's like the biggest thing I've ever done in my writing career. And he was really, really nice. And my little girl and my husband were there, and they got to meet him, and we took pictures. And Eddie Murphy was there because he was like the main guest. I did not get to meet Mr. Murphy. Oh. I know, it was sad. But he had like an insanely large entourage, and he was in his green room and then on stage and then gone. Like that. My husband did see him, somehow he snuck a look in the green room, but I didn't get to see him, which was sad. But it's wild, really fun though. Yeah.
Well, I just realized too, why did I say okay to following Seth Meyers? Those are, it just occurred to me, I was like, okay, well, I hope I don't screw this up.
Thank you for agreeing to do this with me.
Oh my gosh, honestly. Of course. This is an honor. This is an honor. Well, before we dive in, because we have a lot to cover, I thought it might be kind of nice if you could just sort of, in your words, sort of, set the stage for your novel, One of Our Kind, and maybe just sort of describe the story, again, in your words.
Right. Okay, so I've been pitching it as Get Out meets the Stepford Wives. It's definitely a thriller. People have been telling me that they stay up all night reading it. Some people have flung it across the room at the end. Not gonna lie. And then they call their friends. So that's pretty good. It's about a woman named Jasmine who, along with her husband and her young son, moved to a town outside of Los Angeles that bills itself as a Black utopia. Everyone there is Black. It's a very wealthy place. The janitors, the lawyers, the teachers, the venture capitalists, everyone's Black, and most importantly, the police officers are Black as well. She moves there. She expects to find social justice activists like herself, but what she finds is most of her neighbors are more interested in the spa at the center of town. So there's a spa on a hill, very mysterious, very expensive. Her husband starts going to the spa. Everyone else starts going to the spa. Jasmine's pregnant, and she knows something's going on. She meets some like-minded folks, and they start investigating. But the more they investigate, the more dangerous things get. And she really has to figure out who really is one of her kind and who isn't at all. And that is the story. Like that? Oh.
Not everything is as it seems. I love that you shared that somebody, told you that they chucked the book across the room, because there were multiple, certainly in the third act, multiple times where I was like, what? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. How is no one else seeing this? Like, Jasmine, get out of there. Like, what are you doing? Like, so good. And I love the Get Out and the Stepford Wives comparison, because obviously, those are movies, and there's something about this story that just feels very visual, very, very visual, and certainly your expert use of the present tense. I mean, it just reads and sort of feels like a screenplay. And so my first question for you is, for Jasmine's story, for this story, why was it so important for you to show and not tell?
Right. I mean, I love that you say that, because I'm so not a visual writer, actually. Like, the first thing I think of, I hear dialogue in my head all the time, and just monologues. So the first draft of this I wrote in 6 weeks, which is like the fastest I've ever written anything, and that will never happen again. It was like the first time, the last time. But nothing, there was no visuals. There was just conversation. There were just like the ideas and like the bones of the thing. And so all that stuff, like what Liberty looks like, what the spa looks like, all that stuff gets added in revision. So for me, like, I just hear the people. Like, it could be a play. Like, I think that in another life I would be a playwright or something. So then it's like revision 2, 3, 4, where all those details get... I remember my little girl at this age. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, the details get put in then. But I do love that you say it's visual. Hopefully someone, I'm going to knock on wood, that someone makes it into a movie.
Well, that is so interesting, and that tracks, because some of the most interesting scenes in this novel are when Jasmine is at happy hour, or at a dinner party, or the conversations that the reader gets invited into, and obviously that's so intentional. Certainly, as a non-Black person reading this book, and it's just so. Oh man, it's clear that there was so much intentionality there with this idea of inviting someone in to a conversation to listen. So you saying that it's that the first draft, the first iteration was just dialogue and conversations, that's wonderful. So you unpack and again, you unpack and you nuance so much. And one of the things that really stood out to me was your exploration of trauma, memory, and race. And without giving anything away plot-wise, I was wondering if you could maybe build out why the intersection of these three things, trauma, memory, and race, is so important, and maybe how they inform identity.
Yeah, I love this question. This is a really good one. So I think I'll give a little bit of the inspiration for the book, and then I think we can circle back to like why they're linked. So I have three. Mostly when people ask you what the inspiration for your book is, mostly writers don't actually know, right? Because it's kind of a mystery. It's kind of magical even to us, right? It's just like, I don't know, one day this popped in my head. But I do actually know some of the reasons this book came to be. So the first was a conversation I had with a friend of mine a few years ago, and he's Black and an activist, and we had done a panel on race and racism. And then after, we went out to dinner, and we drank wine, a lot of wine. But like on the first glass of red, he said, do you ever wonder who you would be or who we'd be as people if it weren't for the specter of race and racism? Which is one of these questions that's like, it's so big, and it's fantastic, and also impossible. Like, it's an impossible question, right? So, because it's hard to tease apart who you would be if everything was completely different, right? And the thing I've been saying is, it's like asking fish to imagine a world without water, right? So there was that. We just kept drinking because you can't answer that question, so we just like, we talked about it for a little while, and then we moved on. And then there's this Toni Morrison quote that I've known since I was a kid, when she says the very serious function of racism is distraction, and that it keeps you from doing your work, and it keeps you having to prove over and over again your reason for being. And I've known that for such a long time, and actually really had a profound effect on me since I've known it since I was a teenager. So there's that. And then, as all good ideas start in the shower, I was in the shower, and I was listening to this podcast called You're Wrong About. and it was talking about that book, The Stepford Wives by R11. And it was saying that most people misremember this book and misremember what it's about, right? Because we use that term Stepford wife to like beat women over the head with and say she's so robotic. And but the book is actually really feminist, and it's about the men who would want their wives to be robots. So I'm in the shower. I hear this and I scream because I have this idea. And my husband comes running because he thinks it's a spider, because I will burn my house down because of a spider. It's like a real problem. Anyway, he comes running and he's like, "What is your problem?" And I was like, "The Stepford Wives, but black." And he's like, "Not bad," right? So then set all that aside. So all those things happen. And then it's the summer of 2020. George Floyd is murdered. And then the fall comes and I was despairing. And I was really angry, and I wrote it in 6 weeks. And it's all three of those things, right? Like you can see where the memory comes from. There's this idea of like we're formed by our history and the present, and who are you really if all that stuff hadn't happened, right? Like if there wasn't a history of racism, slavery, can those things be teased apart at all? And the book does not have answers to these questions, obviously, but it is meant to provoke us to think. And I mean, I say provoke, I mean in a good way, like in the way that makes you want to lean in and think about things and talk about them. And so that's where the book comes from, and that's why all those things are so intertwined, because it starts with that question.
Yeah, I love that you use the word provoke, because, you know, I did find it just incredibly challenging, and it's so illuminating, again, for a non-Black person to read the perspective and the insight and the reflections that Jasmine has, and the way she prods at certain things. I mean, it was just so well done. Semi-related to this, I think you write motherhood so well. And Jasmine and King and their son, Kamau.
Just interestingly, sorry.
Yeah.
There was this boy in high school. His name was Kamau. I loved him. That is why. Like, oh, God forbid this boy ever hears them. He was like the president of the African American Society in high school, and God, I loved him. He had this girlfriend. She was gorgeous. It was not me. Anyway, that's why Kamau's named Kamau, funnily enough.
That's amazing. That's one of the evil things about being a writer, is you get to just like pepper your book
you
with
do. You absolutely do.
It's so fun. So, oh gosh, and there was that one scene kind of near the beginning where she's talking about the latest, act of police brutality. There was a shooting, and you know, there was without giving anything away, you know, it really deeply affects her, and she thinks about this one moment where her son has this sort of like panicky moment where they pause a movie. And they're like, well, we'll just finish it later. But he gets really anxious about that, because he's like, well, what are they doing in the TV? Like, they're paused. What's happening? And then Jasmine kind of ties that in. All this to say, I think, you know, it's very clear that, when you're writing from this perspective of motherhood, it's coming from a real personal place. And so my question is, how did becoming a parent, I know you have a teen, but how did becoming a parent and raising a family prepare you for this story?
Yeah, that's also a very good question, Julian. I like these. These are very deep.
As a writer, it's hard to not be like, all right, let's see.
I mean, only another writer gets like this deep into the books. This book, I couldn't have written this book 5 years ago, or 4 years ago. Like, it all came together, right? And I had to have, my daughter is 12 years old, so I had to have her before I was able to write this book. Like, craft-wise, I don't think I was a good enough writer, which is not to say that my other books were terrible, but just that I needed to write those before I could write this one. But Jasmine in the story, she moves to Liberty because she wants to protect her family. She wants to protect, she has a young son, and she's pregnant with a boy, and she's married to a man. And she wants a sense of safety in this community, right? So everyone's black, and the police officers are black. And so if Kamau, her son, is walking down the street with a hoodie in the middle of the night and he gets stopped by a cop, he's going to get stopped by a black cop, and presumably nothing is going to happen to him, right? And so she moves to Liberty to foster this sense of safety. And safety is something I think about all the time, right? So, and because of being a mom, and I think all moms think about this, right? Like, we're so protective of them, and there's a way in which we want to protect them physically, but you also want to protect them psychically, right? So you want to protect their innocence, you want them to be in love with the world, and you want the world to love them back, right? And this is the same thing that Jasmine wants, and I think that we all feel that. And then there's a tension in the world, right? Because you want to put them out into it, but sometimes the world is terrible, right? And sometimes you have to take away their innocence in order to protect them. And so I am definitely aware of that, and Jasmine is aware of that as well. So she goes into Liberty sort of reluctantly, but also with the hopes that she can protect her family.
Yeah. I mean, as a as a parent as well. I mean, reading through all of the sort of the logic, it's all there, and you're like and especially certainly for for a black woman, a black mother, it's like okay, you can follow the logic, and it just creates these impossible stakes once the tension gets turned out. It's just great. And you make so many powerful observations in this novel. I wrote a few down. The higher up in a tree you go, the farther away you are from your roots. The four of them might be forgetting about racism for the night, but racism isn't forgetting about them. And then later, when Jasmine is reflecting about the horrific origins of our nation in this really powerful scene where she's observing a piece of art, she reflects, or she thinks rather, she would render stillborn the very idea of America. And that was just like, whoa, I just kind of sat with that line for a moment. So I'm curious, because you really, thread this needle so well, and I'm just curious if you could maybe give us some insight into your process in terms of being able to weave these urgent pleas and these necessary indictments into a very twisty plot. Because the things that Jasmine says and thinks in her actions, there is this sort of urgency to them, and it's a plea, but again, it's also an indictment. So how do you do that so effortlessly while also writing just a really engaging, interesting, twisty story?
Right. Okay, so I'm really shallow. That is the thing. And I mean that, I'm like not kidding. Like, I really like a plotty book, right? Like, I'm the person that you have to pull me along. And so then I have to write them too, right? So I really did want the book to be like, you can't put it down, like, you want to stay up, you're going to not good at your job and keep reading it. But what you're talking about is layering, right? So again, it's each revision gets closer and closer to what I want, right? So some revisions are about the themes, and some revisions are about the character, and some revisions are just about like driving the plot forward. Jasmine is really complicated. I think she's my most complicated character. And what I leaned into with her is the way that like our modern world makes us feel contradictions all the time, right? So you wake up in the morning and you turn on the news and the world is on fire all the time, right? And there is a way, if you're like a reasonably good person, you care and you want to fix it, but also you have your family and you have your job and you need to protect them, and you can't fix everything, right? Like, we all have phones, right? And we all know that the labor practices aren't good, right? So there's a way in which the world just makes you, like, you can't fulfill your own moral, like, you can't follow your own moral compass, right? Like, global warming is real, and yet I have flown every day for the last 10 days, right? And, like, I'm not a bad person, and neither are you guys, right? But the world puts you in this kind of impossible situation. And I think what works for Jasmine and is for her to be complicated like that, for her to want to do the right thing all the time against the world that forces you to choose and like make such not great decisions some of the times, right? Jasmine wants to fix the world, right? She is very judgmental. I love her, but wow, she's pretty. She's pretty judgy, and she makes mistakes, as do we all, right? Like I wanted her to be really complicated because I make mistakes all the time, and as do we all, right? And sometimes she makes the right decision, and sometimes she doesn't. But she really, really wants to protect her family, right? And so she views the world through that lens. She's always contingency planning, and she's always being vigilant, right? And I think in the way that, I think especially people who take care of younger kids, you know that sense of vigilance, right? You're like this, and I gotta fix it. And I think that Jasmine is like that, and she views the world through that lens. I'll just say one more thing. There's Isabel Wilkerson. Do you guys know her? She wrote Caste. She has this great metaphor when she's talking about like the sort of structure of racism and systemic racism. She says, we're all in a house that we did not build, but we're all in it together, right? And the basement's flooding, and the windows are broken, and it doesn't matter how it got there. What matters is that we have to fix it now, right? Like, so forget about the judgments and all of that. Let's just roll up our sleeves and like fix the thing. And I think that is what the book is about. That's why there are like so many back and forth conversations and like trying to interrogate the whole thing, because it doesn't matter. We just have to fix it now.
Wow, that's profound. I love that illustration with the house.
Yeah, that's not mine. That's Isabel. She's so much smarter than me.
No, that's great. I did want to ask one more like craft, writery question. What was the biggest challenge that maybe you experienced or walked through as you were transitioning from writing for young readers to adult readers? I'm really curious.
Yeah, it was actually kind of the same. I think a lot of people tend to think it might be different, but like the category is more on the business side, right? So, right, I mean, you know this, right? When I think about like, say, Everything, or The Sun Is Also a Star, I know it's a 17-year-old protagonist, and I know it's a coming-of-age story. Like, whatever the story I've thought of, it just is meant for kids. Or for, not even for kids, but it's meant to be coming of age. And I actually really love those stories because teenagers at that age, 17, 18, they're so philosophical, right? Like, even if they don't know it and without meaning to be, but they're questioning everything, right? Like, it's the age of, who am I? Do I believe in this? Do I believe in God? Like, who would I want to be in the world, right? And I'm annoyingly philosophical too, so like I'm the person at dinner who's like, but what does it really mean? And like, you're just like, shut up and let me eat, right? So I love writing those. I love being in conversation, like with the kids and like showing them different parts of the world and like being able to say, look at this over here and look at this over here. And I think my books, though young adult books tend to ask a question and tend to point to an answer. This book does not point to an answer. It's not meant to be prescriptive in any way, but it's pointing at a question over and over again and asking us to talk about it. And so I would say that is one of the differences. But when I thought of Jasmine and her sort of dilemma in her life, it was just clearly adult. Like, I knew she was married, I knew she had a son and a baby, and I knew the things I wanted to talk about were not a coming-of-age story. And there is love in this book, but it's not a romance, right? And my young adult books tend to be more romantic. Too much kissing, a lot of kissing in those books.
Young readers love that stuff. Let's be real.
I love that stuff.
Yeah,
Are you kidding?
No, I know. Yes, clearly we write in that genre. Yes, yeah. Okay, so you'll have to forgive me for the big cliche, sort of author question here. But what's maybe one thing that you hope readers take away from One of Our Kind?
Yeah, I mean, I actually really love this question because Usually I don't have an answer, but for this book I do have an answer. The Isabel Wilkerson thing I just said about rolling up your sleeves, I really think that that's true, right? And I think one of the things that's missing from our discourse about race and racism is a sense of grace, right? Like our public discourse is like, it lacks grace, right? There's a way in which we assume the other person means the worst thing possible, and they're the worst version of themselves. And I don't want to sound Pollyanna, because some people really are terrible, right? But mostly people aren't, right? I think most people are reasonably good. And I think most people will do the right thing if they know what the right thing is, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think that the only way things change is like us in this room leaning into conversation and asking questions and really trusting that the other person means well, right? And I cannot tell you how many times I've made mistakes with my friends who are of different cultures or whatever. Like, I have made dumb mistakes. But what saved us is that they know that I love them and it's just a mistake, right? Like, I am not a terrible person. And so you forgive and you move on and it's fine. And similarly, people have been dumb to me, like really dumb. But it's fine because I know they love me, right? And then you talk about it and then you move on and things change and they really, it's like small, right? But it's us like talking to each other and really listening. And if someone says, this thing happened and this is how it made me feel, like, believe them. Mostly they're not lying to you, right? And mostly they mean well. So I would like some more grace. So what I want is for you to read the book, stay up all night, fling it across the room, then call your friends and talk about it, right? Like, I want people to talk about, like, inside of their circles and then outside of their circles. And the end is, a lot of people have very big feelings about the end. I'm not giving anything away, no spoilers, but big feelings. But I really want people to talk about why it ends the way it does. Right?
I was so mad. I was so mad. I was like, you cannot do this to me. Like, I was personally affronted. There was this really interesting study it's cited in this book called Stolen Focus, which I highly recommend. And the study found that people who read fiction were something like 50 to 60 times more empathetic than people who don't read fiction specifically, which I thought was really interesting, and totally makes sense. You know?
I mean, it really does. I mean, books absolutely breed empathy, right? Like, it is hard to spend 300, 400 pages in someone else's life and not understand them. It's hard to hate them, right? In my my second young adult book, The Sun Is Also a Star, so there is a immigration story. There's a Jamaican American girl and she's like falling in love with this Korean American boy, but she's under threat of deportation, right? So she and her family are gonna get deported at the end of the day. And so I was at an event, and I think it was Texas, or the man that came to talk to me was Texan, and he's this big guy, white guy, burly, like big mustache and everything, and he says, you changed my mind about immigration. And I was like, well. And what are you gonna say to that? I was like, that's fabulous, that's so good. I did not expect, because I thought he was gonna be one of those dudes that's like, this is more of a comment, not a question, like one of those dudes. And because some people, but he was great, and he said it really changed his mind, right? And I do think that books can breed empathy, and we should stop banning them.
Yes. Hear, hear. Okay, so this is fun, and by the way, Nicola's not prepared for this at all, but I thought it might be kind of fun before our Q&A portion to just do like a little fun rapid fire round. So here we go. You ready? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Tacos or burgers?
Burgers.
Okay. Mountain house or beach house?
Beach house, from Jamaica.
Okay, yeah, okay. Marvel or DC?
I don't care at all. I'm so sorry.
No, that's the best answer. Yes, thank you. Okay, a couple more. Audiobooks or Kindle?
Okay. This is
I'm
legitimately.
so sorry for these. I am so sorry for
This
these.
is legitimately because I love audiobooks, but like when I'm traveling, like my Kindle is pretty useful, right? Because I can't take like I've been on the road for a while now, and my Kindle has all the books on, and I like cuddling up in bed and reading. So I don't know, both. I'll just take both. I'm sorry.
Fine, that's fair. Cats or dogs?
Cat.
Yeah, I love my cat.
I mean, I like dogs, but
Yeah.
I love cats. Yeah.
I have a cat. Yeah, her name's
Yeah.
Mandy. What's your cat?
Mandy?
Yeah.
I used to have a cat, and unfortunately, she passed away, but her name was Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew. That's so good.
She was not at all intrepid. She was like the worst cat, actually. Like, if I'm being honest, like this is a cat that would, she would like see herself in a reflection, and she would do the thing where all four, like every day, you're like, cat, you know what you look like. I don't understand. What's happening with you? It's like she was insane, but I loved her. Nancy Drew. Not intrepid, solved no mysteries.
0 mysteries were solved. Okay, so why don't we move on now to a Q&A portion? Love to hear from you all.
Okay, and I will say that my favorite part of events is this part, the Q&A part, so please ask your questions. Ask almost anything. I love like talking and discussions, and I'm thrilled you guys are here. So really, ask questions.
I have a question about The Sun Is Also a Star. So you did write 2 different endings to it. There was one that was a little bit more depressing, and then there was the epilogue in an alternate history.
Right.
Which one, even though I know you put it as an alternate history, which ending do you like the most out of the 2?
I mean, the book has been out for a while. I will tell you that the alternate history is the history. They are happy. And also, I like your hair. It's a good color.
Thank you. I'm curious to hear more about this intersection between race and class in the book. So one, with her friendship with Trisha, but also how she experiences liberty and how she thinks about how she grew up, and then also like how her relationship started with King and where they used to live.
Yeah. I think one of the things we don't talk about a lot when we talk about racism is class, especially in America. Like, I don't think we interrogate that a lot. Like, we talk about it as if they were separate, but they're really not. Jasmine she's a poor background, and so does King, but they moved to Liberty because King has met this man who like sort of took him through business school, and now he's become really, really wealthy, and so they've moved to Liberty. And Jasmine is hesitant at first, right, because she's a public defender, and most of her clients, she serves underserved communities, right, and most of her clients are young and poor and in trouble. And she feels a lot of guilt for moving. She feels conflicted because she's protecting her family, but so many of her clients and so many of the members of her community are not protected, right? I think there's a way in which we think that wealth can be protective, and it can be to a certain extent, right? But if you are young and black and you're wearing your hoodie and you're walking down the street, it does not matter how wealthy you are if someone stops you with bad intent, right? And so I really wanted to look at that, the ways in which it can protect you and the ways it doesn't, and the way you can feel. And this is not just like if you're black, right? But I think it's for everyone, because again, once you turn on the news, there's so many people suffering everywhere, but you are also safe, right? And you can feel, why am I safe? Like, why is it okay for me to be safe when someone else is suffering? I live in LA, and it's a 45-minute drive from Beverly Hills, where it's insanely wealthy, right, to Skid Row, right, where these 10 cities, it's astonishing. Like, I mean, it's hard to drive by that. And so, you know, like, I wanted to talk about that. Like we have built a system where we leave people out and people get left behind, and I think that we all feel guilty about it. We all want to fix it, and also you want to protect your own And what do you do with that? What do you do with all of those feelings? And so that's why I put them in like a wealthy community in the first place. Yeah.
Hi. I attend lots of author events, so I loved your questions tonight. Great job. Thank you. I know, they were really great questions. So authors invest so much into the characters. What are your thoughts on, and I haven't read the book, so I'm interested to see what this ending is like. But knowing that, is there pressure to provide a sequel? Or how do you turn off the characters then if you don't do a sequel?
That's a really good question. Right.
Good luck.
This ending, I have to tell you, I wrote it 11 billion times because I knew how the book would end as soon as I thought of the idea, but I had to earn the ending, if that makes sense. Like, I really had to make it so that you believed all the things that happened and the reason, emotionally, you believe the reasons it happened. And I hate when you're reading, especially a thriller where it feels like God in the machine and like something just happens and like then it ends, right? Like you feel like the rug is pulled out from under you. And so writing the end was the hardest thing because I really needed you to be with me, like and to understand everyone's motivations, even the bad guys, right? So it took a long time to get to that place where I felt like I had earned the ending. And I have an editor, and she's really smart, and she would, every time we would get to the end, she would just ask me more and more questions and push me to go deeper because it was hard for me to write. Like, I've written sad books before, and I'm like, fine. Like, I'm just like, it's okay, I know how this story, but this one was harder for me, and I shied away from the ending a lot, and so I had to keep writing it until I could feel in my body that I was done. And there's nothing, you can just feel it when it's done, and I just was like, okay, and I put it away. There's definitely not going to be a sequel. I think I said all the things I wanted to say with it, or asked all the questions I wanted to ask with it.
Hi. Okay, I was actually going to ask a question about the ending, but you just answered it. So I guess I was wondering, I feel like there's something I took away from the book was the kind of disparity between like individual success and then like collective success. Like I see that a lot with, at least especially in the beginning, between like King and Jasmine. I was just wondering if like you could say anything more about that. And then also just side note, I was someone who last night like finished the book and then sat there in silence for like an hour and was just absolutely devastated. So there you go. But yeah.
I'm convinced I'm gonna have to like do like a book club tour like after, because I did one at Penguin Random House, who publishes this book. So we did one with people who had read the book all the way through, and there were like interns and some editors, and we like did this Zoom book club, and my God, that was intense because they had all gotten to, and then they got to ask me all these questions. Again, a lot of big feelings. So I think that I'm gonna do like a book club tour or something so that we can talk through these things. But yeah, I mean, again, there is that tension between individual success and collective success, right? Like, how much do you give to charity? How much do you volunteer of your time and your money and your heart? We live in America, and it's capitalist, and you have to everyone is trying to get as much as they can, and you're pushed to do that, right? It's not like we're all terrible, selfish people, right? Like, the system is set up like that. But I just want to ask the question, is that okay, right? Like, can we all roll up our sleeves and try to fix it? And obviously you have to take care of yourself, but it shouldn't be that I can drive from Beverly Hills to Skid Row in 45 minutes and there are people on the street that you have to walk by, right? Like, I don't think we really want that. So it's up to us. It's not going to get fixed any other way.
Hi, I'm sitting right next to her, so just move your eyesight like 1 degree. I just wanted to give you kudos for your writing in general. Like every book I've read from you is so poignant, but has such nuance.
Thank you. That's really nice.
And I think that's like very evident just from the way you're talking about this book, which I haven't gotten the chance to read yet. But I also know that writing is a job. And so when you feel that there's pressure to write a new story and you haven't had that like moment in the shower, where do you go for inspiration to find a story that you think is worth telling?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I have this notebook that I keep that has all the ideas that I have, like the random things in it. And I just write everything down. And mostly I ignore them, right? But some of them I keep going back to and like fleshing out a little bit or thinking about a little bit. And those are the ones that tend to become something. And sometimes it's just like a bad poem, right? And sometimes it's a short story and sometimes it's a book. But like those moments that like flash, that's never happened, right? Like for this book, that was in the shower. The other books were like notebook things and noodling things that like took a long time to become what they are. This was the first time it was like that. And I think it took 6 weeks to write because all the themes I'd been thinking about my whole life. And so I felt really compelled to write it when I was kind of a nightmare because I would just wake up and I would write, and I would stay up and I would just go. And I write by hand into notebooks. And so I just did it. Yeah. Wait, did I answer your question? Did I? Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
So you said you felt it in your body when you knew that the ending was there. Talk to us about why having a body matters as a writer.
That is, wow. That is profound. There's all this talk about AI, right? The bane of my existence, AI. And my husband says, they're not going to take over to the world until they can feel things in their body, right? That's not going to happen. I hope he's right about that. But the way I exist in the world is as an emotional person and an observant person. Like, I'm the person in Starbucks. If you're having an argument with your spouse, I'm 100% listening and like paying attention and be like, oh, I'm gonna write it down. I love watching people. Like, people watching is one of my favorite things. Like, my husband and I do it all the time. Like, a wine bar, people watching, fabulous. I love the way people will say one thing but mean something else, and you can tell by their gestures. We project a lot with our bodies, and I am really empathetic too. So I'm definitely a feeling person. So like a lot of things start there for me. Like, I can just feel it in my gut. I'm like, okay, this is done, or okay, something's wrong with that person, or it's just the way I am. So, I think that there's a way that we do pretend, especially in our online culture, that we don't have bodies that feel things, right? Like, we are online and people will just say the wildest things that they would never say in person, when you could see the hurt on someone else's face, or you could see that you made them happy. And I do think we should be in our bodies a little bit more, like flaws and all, right? Like, I do think that we should, remember that we get hungry and we get tired and we get happy, and that touch really counts. Like, when my little girl is 6, she still needs just to touch me, right? And she's 12, and Mama is not the coolest. But if she's sad, it's my arms that she comes through. Like, so I do think it'd be better if we were in our bodies a little bit more. But it is how I exist too. Like, I definitely feel things. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm going back to between your young adult books and this one. You mentioned the fact that you kept a journal, and you get your idea, you write your ideas down, and those became books or other or poems, bad poems or something like that. But for this one, you were in the shower. So is it because writing for an adult, you don't have to put on guards? You know, like if you're writing for a young adult, you just like a child, you have to do certain things to make sure that you do not damage or anything. So when you were writing the adult book, you could be a little more free. Like when you were in the shower, it was a flash, and you said, oh, let me write this. But the other ones you pick from your journal that you had diddled with a little bit, so you kind of like went into it a little more easier. And this one, you went into it with a flash.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's so weird how all the books are different, you know, like where they come from and what it takes to write them. This one, I think it's because of all of those things, but then when, you know, George Floyd's murder and then all the protests that summer too, like the fact that there were so many different groups and walks of life protesting, and people kept talking about reckonings and that it was going to change, and then the knowledge that sometimes these things just pass. Like people forget that we say we're going to change and then we don't. So there was a lot of despair when I was writing it. Like I just was like, I don't know that I believe that things are going to change. I think the reason this one happened so quickly is because a lot of the ideas I've been thinking about since I was a kid. Like a lot of the questions that I ask in this book, I've been thinking about for a really long time. So I think that's why, like, I was so compelled. But, you know, to be clear, so 6 weeks it took to write it. The first draft, which was terrible and only dialogue, right? But it took another 3 years to make it into an actual book, right? Like a book that you believe and when you pick it up, you feel something. The thing I always say is that I don't have a career because I'm good at first drafting. I have a career because I'm good at revising. Like I will always revise. Like I'm tenacious and I'll revise and I'll do it again and I'll do it again and I'll do it again. And so this book, it took 3 years of doing it again to earn that ending and to make you feel something. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I want to say, first of all, I have not read your book.
Yes.
And I opened it up today after I purchased it, and there were 2 quotes, one by Octavia Butler and one by Toni Morrison, which immediately let me know that we were going to have a great journey in this book. Someday when someone is quoting you, and your quote is in the preface of a book.
Oh, my God. I mean, that's you guys.
What would it be?
Why are we so deep? What's going on?
Just a little precursor.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, I mean, I really am. Like, I am a romantic goober, right? I really, really believe in love. I'm like no joke, 100%, not kidding about it. I do think love is everything. I think it is the force that makes the world go round. And like we all, like people poo-poo romances and stuff, and like, but love is the thing everyone wants, right? It's the thing we're all trying to get. And I don't just mean like the kissy romantic kind. I mean like family love, love of your work, love of your art, love of your friends, family, siblings, whatever. So, I mean, I guess I would say love is everything. Like I am really lucky because I absolutely have found the love of my life, right? Like I met him in graduate school and he's the best thing ever. And then we had our little girl and she's the best thing ever. And I love writing and it's a thing I meant to do, but it's the third most important thing to me too, right? Because those two are just like my whole world. So I think love is everything. I mean, and it's not Pollyanna, because love is hard. And I don't mean hard like you have to work at it every day, but it is sometimes easier to be unkind. Like it is hard to be kind. It is hard to be empathetic. It is hard to lean in sometimes, right? It's easier to do the other thing. So love is the way. Yeah.
I read the book yesterday as well, and I need to join the book club because all my questions have to, and I'm trying to think how to ask without spoiling anything. But I have 2 questions. You pick whichever one you want. One, Black is capitalized the whole book until there's there's a piece in there. I think it's Jasmine who talks about the big B versus the little b. There's like a sentence. I would love to hear more about that. But also my question, I think, I don't know how to, I'm really glad you spoke about Jasmine because and about Grace.
So I don't want to spoil it. So if you think you can ask me like after, and I will tell you.
Okay.
Right. So.
Well, I'm going to try and make it a bigger, broader question.
Yeah.
But I wish the one thing that really pissed me off about her, she's so intense and such a badass. Like at the end, without a spoiler, like what she's going through at the end. I work with people in their bodies, and I was just like feeling her body at the end, and I was like, this woman's a beast. Like I love her, but no Grace, right? And then, but what I really want to ask you about is hypervigilance and King. And I want to know more about King because I love the way you write about their relationship, and he's so solid. And the moments where you think that he's shifting, but he never does. And so, again, I don't want to go into the ending, but there's a lot one could say about hypervigilance, but I want...
So she's definitely hypervigilant.
Yeah.
And I think in the way that, especially when you were in the summer of 2020, or you hear another sort of police shooting, or if you just turn on the news and, there's potential for, there are many, many wars ongoing and many, many terrible things, and global warming is happening and it's really hot today and it's going to be hot tomorrow. And if you are paying attention, you are hypervigilant. And sometimes you don't want to pay attention because that state is not sustainable. But Jasmine sustains it, right? She sustains that state, and part of the book is questioning why we've made a world that would make it so that you have to be like that, right? Like where you feel like, I can't protect everyone unless I am going like this all the time. And really that's what part of the book is about. It's examining that, like why have we made it like this? Like why this is a poor way to live, right? And then the big B versus the little b, Jasmine moves to liberty, and it's a Black utopia. Everyone is Black. And Jasmine assumes that everyone is the same there, but why? Right? Like, why does she do that? And that's one of the questions in the book, too, because there is a way that we say that Black people are not a monolith and then treat them as a monolith. And I think that everyone does it, like including Black people, right? So that's part of the question too, is like, why do we think that we know people by the color of their skin? Like if I walk into the room and, there's a Black girl with blue hair, you know that there's a Black girl with blue hair. You don't know anything about, like, that doesn't tell you anything, does it? And that's part of the question. And there's something so nice with identifying with a community, but there's also sometimes, well, how much do you think you know? Like, how much do you know? Again, no answers in the book, but really good questions, I think.
Hello.
Hi.
So I have a lighter question. You said, I haven't read the book either, but you said earlier you hoped the book was made into a movie. And so I was going to say, is it difficult for you to give your characters over to be made into a movie? Do you enjoy that process, or is it a mixed bag?
So I'll tell you a funny story. So my first book, Everything, was made into a movie. And the first time I got the script, it was so bad. Holy crap, it was bad. I read it, and I had no experience with this world. So I read it and I was like, well, why are we making the movie? Because this is so different, and why are you making the worst version of my book? I don't get it. My husband wouldn't even finish reading it. He was just like, no, this is terrible. But then, the version that actually is on the screen, I really like. And there's a scene in there that I wish I had written, and I didn't. And I really, really love the scene that's in the book. I mean, that's in the movie, that's not in the book. And so there was a journey from that first read to the film. And what I take from it is that there's more art in the world about these characters that I love, right? So like the fact that Maddie and Ollie have a book version and a movie version, that's great because it's Maddie and Ollie, and I love those two. So they're different. They're absolutely different. I had some good luck because like I got to give notes on the script, and when you sell an option, and you know this, I'm sure, like they don't have to include you. They could set it in space. They could do whatever, because once you sell the right to the movie, they have the right. And Warner Brothers did let me like give notes and stuff like that. But they took some notes and they ignored some notes. And frankly, that's their right. And also, I'm not good at it. I'm not a movie maker. Like I write books, and I would be bad at doing movies. So in some ways, it's good and bad. I mean, I obviously want the movie to be made because then more people read the book. So that's really what I want. At the end of the day, is for more people to read the book, and then we can have a big book club.
Hi, when you think about yourself as a writer today and then 3 books ago, or even back before that first book, do you think or in what ways do you think you've changed?
I like this. So I used to work in finance. So I was really good at math in high school, and math led me astray because then I went to college and I was an electrical engineering major, and it was a lot of math. And then I graduated and I went to work for a Wall Street firm. So we made like trading software, and then I spent 20 years like doing analysis and working on a trading desk, which basically means I just got yelled at by very wealthy men all day. Like it was the worst job. And all through it, I went to grad school throughout, and I kept writing throughout. And then I got to quit my day job on May 22nd, 2015, which I'm still in there. I used to be really afraid that I would have to go back to that job. And I could feel my soul leave my body every time I entered those buildings. So I think at the beginning I was a very sort of scared writer too, like I'm not, just sort of fearful. I think my craft has gotten better. I think there's a kind of success that you can have that makes you scared though, because like when I wrote Everything, it became very successful, and there are terrible reviews of it, right? So like I went on Goodreads one day, and there was this I know. I know. I was young. I went on there, and there was this terrible review. It was like animated. It hated the book, hated me. And I remember my husband saying, "You can't do this because your mojo is all you have, and you're like giving it away. Like, what are you doing?" But there is a way when you see a bad review, it makes you go, "Oh, I shouldn't do that anymore." But also, when you see really good reviews, you think, "Oh, maybe I should do that every time." And so all of it's kind of bad for art making, actually, right? Because like you have to be able to turn it off. So everything was very successful. And then The Sun Is Also a Star was pretty successful too. And like it gets noisy in there. Like you have, at the beginning you're writing just for yourself and you don't have any feedback. And then you have a lot of feedback. And it took me a while to turn it off, actually. And just like be able to, when I go home at the end of the week, I'm on deadline for another book, and it's going to take me a few days to like come down and feel like I'm a writer. Because right now I honestly kind of feel like I'm a fraud because I keep talking about writing, but I'm not writing. And I need to get back to actually writing. So there's like the public part where you have to like turn that down and be able to focus more. I mean, I think I've gotten to be a better writer. I think I've gotten to be a more complicated writer, which is nice, but I'm also a more scared writer, which I wasn't before, because I mean, people can be mean. Not gonna lie, people say things, you're like, what is wrong with you? I'm a person, you're crazy. Yeah, that was a long, sad answer, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you guys again so much for all those incredible questions, and thank you for writing an amazing book. If you haven't read it, I guarantee you will read it in one sitting. I mean, it is like unputdownable. I mean, it's so wonderful.
You are so nice, thank you.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
I want to say thank you for your very deep writer questions. Those were really nice. Thank you for doing this with me. I know, you have a whole life, so thank you for coming out. And thank you guys for coming out and spending some time with me. You You guys, this is like a intense session, but I was here for it, so thank you for being thoughtful and sweet.